Imagine living in a society where lies spread as truths, and the voices that dare to question them are silenced or ignored. What happens when critical thinking is replaced by blind conformity? The answer to this unsettling question comes from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a theologian whose theory of stupidity remains surprisingly relevant today. Bonhoeffer not only fought against political oppression, but also against the human phenomenon of active ignorance, an evil that undermines our societies and keeps us trapped in cycles of misinformation and blind obedience. In this video, we will explore Bonhoeffer's powerful theory of stupidity, a deep analysis of how passivity, fear, and manipulation prevent us from thinking independently. Get ready for a journey that will challenge your ideas about truth, freedom, and responsibility in the modern world. Picture this: you're in a room full of people all gathered around a table. On the table lies a simple card with an image. The instructions are clear: observe the image and describe it. As the discussion begins, you notice something odd. The card depicts a tree, but some describe it as a mountain, while others insist it's a river. The more you focus on the card, the more confused you become, because you're certain it's a tree. You see it with your own eyes, yet the group keeps arguing over their mistaken versions, each person holding on to their interpretation, even when you point out the error. The crowd simply ignores you, unwilling to accept the truth. This situation mirrors the central issue we face in today's society: people who refuse to acknowledge obvious, irrefutable truths. From political decisions that harm everyone to the spread of misinformation, it seems we've collectively chosen to live in a world of distorted reality. But why? Why do we ignore the evident? Why do we allow ourselves to be swept into false narratives, even when the truth is staring us in the face? This question resonates with many, because it's not just a theoretical issue. It's something we experience daily in social media, the news, and our interactions with one another. People often cling to beliefs even when they are clearly contradicted by facts, sometimes to the point of absurdity. Why does this happen? Is it ignorance, or is there something deeper at play? Perhaps Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a theologian, pastor, and resistance fighter during Nazi Germany, spent much of his time grappling with these same questions. Arrested in 1943 for his role in resisting the Nazi regime, Bonhoeffer reflected deeply on how Germany, a nation once known for its poets and thinkers, had become a land of fear, cowardice, and complicity. Bonhoeffer's insights into this matter are as relevant today as they were in the 1940s. At that time, the moral collapse of Germany was evident in the rise of blind obedience, the spread of propaganda, and the refusal to challenge authority. It wasn't just that people didn't know the truth, it was that they were actively discouraged from seeking it. In many ways, Bonhoeffer's struggle to understand the moral decay of his country mirrors our own struggle today. In our modern world, we see similar patterns emerging: fake news, conspiracy theories, blind loyalty to ideologies, and the rampant spread of misinformation. Just as Germans turned a blind eye to the horrors of the Nazi regime, we too seem to ignore or avoid confronting uncomfortable truths, even when they are right in front of us. Bonhoeffer's reflections highlight something crucial. Ignorance, or what we might call stupidity, isn't just an intellectual shortcoming. It's a mental block, a refusal to think critically, a barrier to independent thought. It's not simply about not knowing, it's about choosing not to know, or worse, being conditioned to avoid knowing. From his perspective, stupidity goes beyond ignorance. It's about being actively discouraged from questioning the status quo, confronting uncomfortable facts, and developing independent thinking. Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity was not only an intellectual problem, but a social one. Stupidity spreads through societies like a virus, infecting entire groups of people who, rather than challenging what they're told, simply conform. Fear, ideology, and propaganda work together to shape beliefs and perceptions, making people more vulnerable to manipulation. The moment stupidity intersects with authority, it becomes incredibly dangerous. Leaders who lack critical thinking skills can make disastrous decisions, and those around them, often too fearful or obedient to question, fall in line. Stupidity in this context is not just an individual flaw, it's a social condition. This dynamic is not just theoretical, it has been studied in social psychology. A classic example is the 1951 Asch conformity experiment, which revealed just how easily people are influenced by group pressure, even when they know the group is wrong. In the experiment, participants were asked to identify which of 3 lines matched the length of a reference line. The majority of the group was instructed to give an incorrect answer. Surprisingly, 75% of participants conformed to the group's wrong answer, even though they knew it was incorrect. The experiment demonstrated just how powerful group pressure is in suppressing independent thinking, and serves as a warning about the dangers of groupthink in our own societies. But if stupidity is so widespread, how can we overcome it? This is a question that has tormented societies for centuries. The truth is that fighting stupidity is not just about knowing more or being presented with more information. Bonhoeffer believed that the struggle against stupidity required more than just facts or logic. It needed a deeper, more fundamental change in how we approach the world. From his perspective, stupidity is not merely ignorance. It is a mental block that prevents us from seeing things clearly, a kind of cognitive blind spot that resists the truth. Overcoming it, therefore, requires more than an intellectual commitment. It demands a shift in how we interact with reality itself. Bonhoeffer pointed out that, in a world flooded with misinformation, it is easy for people to fall into patterns of complacency. In such an environment, people are constantly bombarded with information that is not always true, but they accept it passively. This makes critical thinking a revolutionary act. The ability to see beyond the surface, to dig deeper into the information we encounter, is no longer just a skill. It is an act of rebellion against the systems that try to keep us passive and uninformed. It is no longer enough to rely solely on what we hear or read. Instead, we must question everything, constantly seeking the truth. When we begin to question, we not only confront the lies around us, but we also start to free ourselves from the influence of those who seek to control our thoughts and actions. Independent thought of this caliber demands a commitment to personal responsibility. Bonhoeffer argued that it's not only about intellectual autonomy, but also moral independence. We must own our thoughts, actions, and beliefs. When we do, we refuse to be carried away by the tide of popular opinion. Instead, we actively choose what we believe and why. This doesn't mean we must reject the ideas of others outright, but we must approach them critically, filtering them through the lens of our own reasoning. It's a mindset that requires both effort and discipline. Most people are content to follow the crowd, but breaking free from this herd mentality takes courage, a courage that Bonhoeffer himself demonstrated during his resistance to the Nazi regime. Only by cultivating such independence can we overcome the pervasive force of stupidity and begin to see the world as it truly is. So how do we fight the cycle of stupidity in today's world? Bonhoeffer offers some practical steps. First, we must encourage critical thinking. This means questioning everything we read, hear, and are told by those in power. We must seek reliable sources of information and be willing to challenge false narratives, even when they come from trusted individuals. Second, we must take responsibility for our actions and beliefs. We can't afford to be influenced by peer pressure or societal conformity. We must stand firm in our values and make decisions based on facts, not fear. Finally, we must embrace independent thinking. In a world that rewards conformity, it's easy to follow the crowd, but true progress comes from those who dare to think for themselves and challenge the status quo. Bonhoeffer's message is clear. Each of us has the power to break the cycle of stupidity, but it requires a conscious and active decision. He didn't believe that society's ills would self-correct, nor that people would suddenly become wise. Instead, he maintained that it was up to individuals to decide to free themselves from the mental traps that keep them passive and uninformed. This is not a passive role. It's an active and ongoing responsibility to think critically about the world around us and engage with the narratives presented to us, whether by the media, political leaders, or even our social circles. Only by making that decision can we hope to break the cycle of ignorance and misinformation that keeps us all stuck. But choosing to think critically isn't easy, especially in a world that bombards us with information. In the age of social media, 24-hour news cycles, and an endless flow of content, it can feel like a battle to retain our own thoughts, let alone question the information being fed to us. Yet, Bonhoeffer's emphasis on courage is crucial here. It takes courage to look at the world critically and highlight what's wrong, especially when most people around you are either complicit or indifferent. Speaking out can feel isolating and even threatening. It often means going against the grain, challenging authority, or defying popular opinion. But without this courage to question and challenge, we remain trapped in a cycle of blind obedience, where facts and reason are ignored in favor of conformity. The stakes are far too high to remain passive in the face of misinformation, lies, and manipulation. Bonhoeffer understood that inaction isn't a neutral choice. It's a choice that benefits the established powers who rely on complacency to maintain control. We see this today as false narratives spread and people continue to make decisions driven by fear, ignorance, or manipulation. The future of our societies depends on our ability to resist these forces, recognize when we are being deceived, and act on truth. It's not just about individual freedom, it's about the collective health of our societies. If we allow ourselves to remain passive, ignoring the falsehoods around us, we become complicit in the very system that keeps us in the dark. This is why Bonhoeffer's message is as urgent today as it was in his time. The only way forward is through active commitment, courage, and an unwavering dedication to truth. So, are you ready to show the courage to challenge the cycle of stupidity? It's time to take responsibility for your thoughts, actions, and beliefs. Think critically, question the status quo, and make decisions based on facts, not fear. This is the only way forward, and the choice is yours. If this message resonates with you, leave a comment below writing, "Stupidity is a mental block, a refusal to think critically," to show your commitment to breaking free from the cycle of stupidity. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that challenges the status quo and promotes independent thinking.